Welcome to SmithWeekly Discussions, an occasional program for our members of SmithWeekly Research. Please note this program is a private discussion and everything contained herein is for entertainment and educational purposes only. With that, we hope you're in a comfortable position along with your favorite beverage to enjoy the discussion. We remind our audience to examine our show notes attached to each of our shows to better understand how our program functions. Before we get into our discussion today, we want to say thanks for questions coming from our audience at SmithWeekly, including Mike P. at Gold Silver Dig, Paul M., Todd A., and Jack T. On the program today is a new guest and one we're pleased to have join us. Mr. Terry Lynch is on for this episode. Terry is the Chief Executive Officer of Power Nickel. The company is focused on advancing the Nisk polymetallic project in James Bay, Quebec, Canada, where the company has discovered nickel, copper, cobalt, and platinum group metal mineralization. The project also includes precious metals as part of the discovery. The company is listed on the Toronto Venture Exchange under the symbol PNPN and also on the US OTC markets under the symbol PNPNF. Mr. Lynch, it's good to have you on the podcast. Welcome, sir.
Great to be here, Andrew. Thanks for having us. Really appreciate you taking the time to give us a conversation.
Absolutely, Terry. It's great to finally connect with you, and been following Power Nickel here for a bit of time since it came on our radar. And of course, you're new to the program here. I'm going to guess that a bulk of our audience may not know who you are. Why don't we start here by you covering off your background and relevant experience in the junior natural resource sector?
Sure. So I'm obviously CEO of Power Nickel. Been with Power Nickel pretty much since 2011. Prior to that, I had been a board member at a company called First Gold and an investor in the space, for many years. The junior resource market is an interesting market to say the least. Joining it, with the predecessor company to Power Nickel, which was called International PBX. The name just changed, from PBX to Chilean Metals to Power Nickel, and riding the vagaries of the challenging markets that the last 10, 12 years has been. But we got involved to sort of help a friend out of a difficult situation, and then stayed with it over the course of time, trying to skate, our investment back on side. And it was a pretty lonely skate for a long period of time. And then eventually we, about 4 years ago or so, we acquired the Nisk project in Quebec, and that's when our fortunes changed, and we started to evolve from being Chilean Metals to eventually becoming Power Nickel because of our acquisition of what was the Nisk project, which was at the time a historical 3.1 million ton 1.5% nickel, which was fine enough. We were growing that. The origin story is that we grew that very nicely up to over 8, maybe it's 8.5 million tons now, and then searching for more nickel sulfide, we stepped out 5.5 kilometers to the northeast on our project package in Quebec, and we struck, drilled a hole there that was on an ultramafic outcrop, and at 60 meters we hit massive sulfides. Turned out we had hit the discovery zone of discovery hole of the line zone, and it was almost 8 meters of 1 ounce PGMs and platinum group metals and 1.5% copper. And that was obviously a sensational hole, but what happened afterwards became even more sensational, in that we drilled 16 holes sort of shortly thereafter, and 15 of the 16 hit, and half of them were like spectacular hits, probably averaging 10 meters of 10% copper equivalent, that type of thing. So obviously such a string of holes hasn't been put together for a very long time, 30, 40, 50 years, some period of number. And it's now 40 holes plus into the line zone, and continue to have over 50% success rate. And analysts will say that we're somewhere approaching 8 to 10 million tons of north of 5% copper equivalent. Again, shocking numbers, really. And we really think it's just scratched the surface. So we've got a long ways to go on the discovery, and we're happy to talk to your audience about that today.
Terry, thank you for that, and quite an interesting story. And you guys definitely have had some good success here on the project, and I'm pretty impressed with what the results have been so far, and really also some of the speed at which you guys have started to bring this forward here, and definitely interested in seeing how this goes in 2025. just one thing, and I want to move on here to the market briefly here, but how did you guys stumble upon this? Just tell maybe a little bit of that, because you guys were Chilean
Yeah,
focused. You
sure.
guys had those projects in Chile, and then all of a sudden, you guys picked this project up, you optioned it. What caught the attention of your team when you guys saw this?
Yeah, so what happened is that I was an investor in a company called Critical Elements, very nice lithium play in trying to help Critical raise some capital and to recover from the first lithium up and down cycle, where it raced ahead of $2 and came back to in the low 20s and 30s. I put together a group. We made an investment, and while we were going through the Critical story at the time, I noticed that they had historical project called Nisk, and one of my shareholders had given me some insight to it, and I asked, and John Sebastian Lavallee, who is the CEO of Critical and a good friend and a great guy, and basically said, JS, look, I don't think you can be a lithium guy and a nickel guy, and things are getting shaky in Chile, and because of the at the time, the new leadership in Chile was appearing to go very, very, very left wing relative to what Chile had historically been. So we were looking around for a new place to focus. And so we made a great deal, I think a fair deal to both parties, where we acquired ultimately 80% of the project, and they had 20, and we earned in, which is now fully earned in, and so that was the origin story. That's how we acquired the project, which is through a good personal relationship and then a desire to find a more hospitable place to invest our money.
That's great. Yeah, it's good to hear this and how you guys shifted gears here and added this jurisdiction. And of course, now you're back up in Canada and Quebec there. So appreciate how you guys have put this together. Terry, one of the things out there, of course, well, and you guys have demonstrated this with the company already, is, good discovery does not tend to discriminate at all. And when you look at the market for nickel, copper, and PGMs today, out of those, you got to have an opinion on this. And of course, I can respect you if you're not going to make any predictions here and not asking for that at all. But what metal, or maybe perhaps a few of them in the discovery package, do you guys see as having really the most potential for price increases? And for what reasons do you think that would be in the years to come?
Yeah, so I think that copper is sort of what everyone would assume we'd say, and I think it's certainly our first point. And I think copper generally is they say it's doctor economy, so and then that's probably what's maybe could be a bit of a challenge this year for copper pricing this year. We'll see. I suspect what counterbalances the challenge on the economy, which may or may not be impacted by tariff wars and these sorts of things, but what counterbalances it is the extreme looming shortages and the difficult time it takes to bring these projects to market. So, copper is, in addition to being Dr. Economy, is also Mr. Electrification. So even if you don't see EVs as rising as rapidly as maybe we forecast a couple of years ago, they're still going to be a growing part of our energy mix. I don't think anybody listening thinks that EVs are going away or that we're going to have less EVs today than we will in 5 years. We probably could agree that it's going to be a doubling or at least that at this point. So that's just part of the copper story. But the bigger part is the energy consumption. People told me, and a smarter person than myself said, that two charts we should all be concerned with as humans, and as investors, is the population growth, and as long as that's moving upward to the right, and then the energy consumption growth, as long as that's moving upward to the right, which I don't think anybody's disputing at this point, then there's going to be a need of a lot more materials. So I think you look at AI and what's happening there, and the population growth, people getting more and more urbanized. So copper is going to rise as a result of all those demands. And so we think that that's going to be very buoyant for copper pricing and move us from where we're at here to, I think north of $5 comfortably, and who knows where it might stop. Second commodity we like a lot. I like, the platinum group elements. Platinum and palladium have been sort of down, really, if you look at gold and silver in the precious metals complex. And for long swaths of time, platinum and palladium was equivalent to or price-wise to gold, and now they're a fraction. So I think people thought that, maybe with the energy transition that these elements would no longer be needed. As it turns out, they are needed in the energy transition. And as it turns out, the energy transition is really more of an energy acquisition. We need a lot more energy all the way around, and it's unlikely that oil and gas is finished. I think, I believe oil and gas is robust, healthy life ahead of it. And so if you believe that, then catalytic converters will still be needed. So I think you're starting to see that now. The platinum palladium group is bouncing back, and as a PGE discovery, other than Stillwater, which is ridiculous PGE grades, we're probably the second highest grade discovery on the planet. So it's pretty crazy. And so we're talking copper equivalent numbers, at these very, very low PGE numbers. The PGE numbers go back to normal. Wow, our copper equivalent numbers go off the chart. So we're bullish on that. Nickel, the the much beaten metal, is an interesting story. And before I talk about the nickel story, I will say that shortly, maybe even later this week, we're changing from our name from Power Nickel to Power Metallic Mines. So obviously we basically are doing that fundamentally because of the makeup of our ore body as being obviously much more polymetallic in nature. We feel ultimately our ore body will be 33% copper, 33% PGEs, and 33% nickel. So as with the name of Power Nickel, we've had some people not take meetings because they thought, we're not interested in nickel, or I think retail investors sometimes hear the name Power Nickel and think, next, I'm not going to listen to the story. And individually, when we meet investors, at conferences or on roadshows or whatever, we can talk to them about that and why nickel isn't a four-letter word, and why it's, especially North American nickel, is a powerful edge and a super commodity. But we can't meet everyone, so maybe changing the name just allows us to have like a neutral impact on people. They just then get into the story itself and see how phenomenal this discovery is, and go from there. But generally speaking, I think nickel is probably you could still have a softer year this year, but probably at the bottom of its range, and has a lot more upside than downside. And that's globally. The Indonesians are realizing that they need to restrict the supply because they're savaging their own country with it environmentally, and it's not helped their price case scenario. They're really just helping the Chinese manufacturers who maybe don't have the same long-term objectives as the Indonesians do. And I think that certainly in North America, Fortress North America, you can see President Trump, getting into his first wave of action on that. He's determined to restore America's manufacturing dominance, and part of that is supply chain surety. And, there's the last nickel mine in the United States is shutting down this year. So North America needs North American nickel supply. So, there is some in Canada, thankfully, and we've got, obviously ours would probably be, certainly the next high grade project up. And we think that when we ultimately develop this, there'll be a robust market for nickel. And so that'll be fantastic. And then the other thing that we've done that has been a little bit different is that we're approached by the largest private nickel refiner in the world, CVMR, and about making a nickel refinery using the Nisk nickel concentrate and making nickel powders. So nickel powder is a completely different business than nickel concentrate. So nickel concentrate is LME pricing. It might be 16,000 today. I didn't look, but something in that range, 15, 16,000. Nickel powder business is 40 to 60,000 per ton. And it's basically it costs you about another 4,000 or so to make it there. But it's a very complicated process. Not many people can do it. But the CVMR group, who is doing a feasibility study on us right now to do that, has already invested several $1 million in Power Nickel with a view to putting this nickel refinery project together. And that's a different animal. So this nickel powders are used for three things primarily. They're used for EVs. Best way for EV batteries to receive nickel is as nickel powder. The second thing they're used for is defense, and so missiles and bullets and frigates and hardening of metals in defense situations. And the third thing is 3D printing. So if your Chevy breaks down and your gasket's blown when you go to the Chevy dealership, they might not be sent to the warehouse for it anymore for that spare part, they might spin it up in the back room. So that's what 3D printing is doing, and it's growing at that whole sector 26% per annum. So it's a bit of a different story, but there is that. And then finally, in our commodity mix, we've got the gold and silver, which are about equal parts, probably representing about 7-8% each. And of course, the precious metal market's been a very robust one. We think these types of economies will likely see even further growth in the precious metal pricing, and having that is sort of a natural hedge. And that's one of the reasons why the polymetallic mines are the greatest mines, the most profitable mines in the history of the world. So people think it's a gold mine or a diamond mine or a uranium mine, but the best mines, the most profitable mines you can discover are polymetallic. They're super uncommon. The biggest one, the best mine in the history of the world, is a mine called Norilsk in Russia. And it's the only mine that's got $1 trillion worth of materials either in the ground, either in the ground or have been produced. They have $1.4 trillion historically. Crazy part about that project is 90% of it, if you can believe it, is in 1 square kilometer. So think about that's mind blowing. And our project, Nisk, in many ways has similar grades as Norilsk, obviously, but over, in this case, 15 to 30 meter sections versus kilometer sections. Although ours seems to potentially could stretch for kilometers, so that's the exciting part of it. So a long-winded answer. I probably should let you get back in control here, but I hope that helps.
Very interesting comments, Terry, and thank you for expanding on those items. And I think that covers quite a bit of things we can continue to talk on here, but I want to get into the company news here in just a moment. But yeah, very good comments on how you look at the market here, how you see this coming together, and then of course, some of those initial comparables, and then the interest that's already coming into this company. We're in discovery stage and expansion of that discovery, and yet there's already folks talking about feasibilities and plans and down the road here. Come back to those in a few minutes here. But on the news items, recent news here, the company just announced that it is moving its Chilean projects as well as the Golden Ivan project in British Columbia into a new vehicle to be distributed to shareholders. Talk about this transaction, the reasoning behind it, and are there plans to monetize other projects in the portfolio, Terry, while the company focus on the Nisk project? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we moved our Chile projects and our BC Golden Ivan project into a vehicle called Chilean Metals Inc. It's a private vehicle at the moment, and we kept half in Power Nickel and we spun out half to our shareholders. The general reason to do that, twofold. One, the exploratory nature of these projects. These are like really great exploration stage projects. And some, like in Chile, we've actually done drilling there and have a fair bit of scientific data. One case we had 40 meters of 0.7% copper intercept at a reasonable, like 140 meters or so, but we weren't able to follow it up. A couple of reasons why. One was we didn't have a ton of drilling money. Second is one of the biggest challenges with Chile is it's in this case ours is in the Atacama Desert, in a very easy place to drive to, but a difficult place to explore because the desert sands are tricky. They're variable in length and thickness, and so one of the interesting breakthroughs that we've used to help us discover so successfully at Nisk was a new technology called ambient noise. It's run by a company called Fleet Space Technologies. And going through the due diligence on that, as we were doing it for use at Nisk, one of the things we understood was that they had been developed in West Australia and been very successful in West Australia, which is, of course, a lot of desert. So when I asked them, I said, well, look, the general problem with why people aren't exploring the deserts is because of the sand, and the sand basically has a element in it called caliche, which is like a mineralized limestone, and it obstructs IP and gravity, which are the traditional tools for geologists to use to explore, and geophysicists, and they help to get them a sense of the lithographic makeup of the rocks underneath the surface. In sand, that's difficult because this caliche obstructs those signals. So what some people have done, they've used like Sol Gold was a good example. They used blaster rigs to get down to the bottom of the sand, which was fairly, I guess, normal thickness, and then they were able to run their sensors from there, and that helped them twig them onto that great discovery they made. And unfortunately, in where we're at in the Atacama, we've had 30 meters and we've had 300 meters. So it's super difficult to sort of predict. Yeah, so we didn't do that. But with this new technology, we've been able to, with Fleet, go back into Chile, and we've used them twice over the last year. One was to sort of scope the area out, and the second sort of to hone it in. And we just last week, when I was in New York, we went through the full plan. And the neat thing about the Fleet package is you can integrate all your other intel, the IP and gravity and magnetics and treatments and structural geology approaches and geochemistry, etc. And you can iterate through that. And we've been able to really identify, we think, some really scary, exciting gel packages for Chilean Metals Inc. So we're sort of stoked. So that closed today, in fact. And so our plan is to we'll have I guess around a 3,000 meter to 4,000 meter program that'll start in April, I expect, in Chile, and partially funded by Power Nickel. Contributed $1 million before we left, and then we'll raise some additional capital in the private co, probably amongst our shareholders. We'll certainly give them all the opportunity to participate, and we'll target the drill rig in Chile on that because we were super excited about what we see there. And then, Golden Ivan has got some other, we just upgraded our 43101 there. The Golden Ivan project in BC is literally overlooks the town of Stewart, which is the start of the Golden Triangle. I don't know if you know Scotty Resources, one of my favorite junior golds. It's immediately north of our project, like on bordering it, and some of their best intercepts around the border, and strike is just south. So our package was going to be the flagship of our company until I found Nisk, and it never been drilled. Has 4 sets of surface samples that delivered over a half-ounce gold at surface with a lot of copper. So we're quite excited about that. We're going to drill that this summer, also in the spin out, and so it'll be an exciting spin out. And then we would plan to take it public, and in probably in Q3 on the results of what we've executed in Chile and in BC. Again, a long-winded version of what's going on, but it's an exciting spin out play, and we felt that this is the best way to monetize those forgotten assets in the company that weren't receiving the value that we think they should have. Back in the day, they traded for 25, 30 million. It's just been forgotten. So I think that's the type of potential value they'll have in the future. And who knows what can happen, as when you're drilling, and things can turn in a hurry, as they did for us at Nisk.
And so the audience has another company that they can follow here, obviously private to start out, but I'm sure you guys will be looking to raise capital, and there'll be some opportunities there for the audience to follow.
Yes.
As well as maybe potential future monetization events on some of the other projects that the company still holds. Before we get into capital structure, I want to ask you about this. The company recently announced some drill results from the fall campaign, including hole 79 most recently, as well as other targets to be tested under now the winter program. Talk about those results coming out of the fall program, as well as the targets for the winter campaign, and when you think you'll have those initial results.
Yeah, so I think we posted a couple of results, and they were very positive. 4 to 6% copper equivalent over various different sections. So again, confirmation that it's the line zone is not a flash in the pan. It's at this point 550 meters wide at the top, 600 meters deep. It's open east, it's open west, and it's open at depth. So that was exciting enough. And then we stepped out 700 odd meters to the east, and drilled and found another what looks like a lion zone 2 or tiger. We don't know what, we haven't decided on the name yet, but it was a very exciting discovery for us. I guess it's interesting, it might be interesting for the audience to know, how do we find these things? Why did you find them? Because what had happened, as I said, we had this nickel deposit, sort of, if you think of it, like if you're looking at an iPhone, like I am looking at an iPhone right now that we're talking on, and the bottom left-hand corner, we had this nice nickel project that started off at 3.1 million tons, and we grew it to over 8.5 or whatever. And we think there's going to be 20 or 30 million tons of nickel down there. And then we, in searching for more nickel, we were, as junior miners do, you have a budget. So we had our budget, and we had the average length of the hole on the Nisk was 400 meters, and we had 200 meters left in the budget. And at that point, I was the guy who was the budget. I was writing checks, And so our team at GeoVector said, Terry, do you want to drill one more hole at Nisk? What are your thoughts? And I said, well, what are our alternatives? I said, what about that spot up in the northeast? They had mentioned that they had this identified this ultramafic expression at surface, and one of our geos, Eric here, had been sharp enough to go to the Quebec database, I guess, and find that there was an old EM anomaly there. And so it looked like something that was quite exciting anomaly they wanted to drill. And they said, yeah, that's a great one. Let's give that a shot. So we did. And then at 60 meters, we hit the discovery hole. And that really turned the company, on its. We moved it from like basically $250 rock to $500 to $700 rock. And so that was mind blowing, and that was the big change. And so now we've got the Lion Zone, and what we realized is that we didn't have a nickel sulfide anymore. We had a polymetallic, and we knew enough to know it was a polymetallic, but we knew enough to know that we didn't know a lot about polymetallic exploration. So in one of those good fortune things in life, my son, who's is a CFA and a major mining investor in his own right, he said to me, Dad, I watched this video from amongst my peer group. He's at Mintwits online. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's a sort of a very influential group of mining analysts, experts, online, and he's one of them. And they get to see certain things, and he saw this somehow through his path, and he says, Dad, you got to watch this video. It's this Dr. Steve Beresford guy, Aussie, and he's pretty much the top polymetallic guy in the world, and he's talking about finding the next Norilsk. He obviously doesn't know anything about Nisk, but what he's describing is sort of what we found at Nisk. He said, listen to it. So I listened to the video, and I thought, wow. And he said, so Dad, go and contact this guy. I'm thinking, yeah, easier for you to say. So anyway, in a funny story, I reached out through LinkedIn. By God, the guy gets back to me, and we start to, I sent him assays, and, we started chatting, and, and then over some time and some due diligence at his side, I convinced him that he should, become an advisor to us and come across and help our team, exploration team, which obviously had done a great job, exploring and finding the thing and even expanding it. But, we were not expert in the nuances of polymetallic exploration. And I knew this, and the team knew this. So as Steve comes across and he goes up to the site, which is the site, by the way, is in Quebec. It's up by James Bay, which is about a third of the way up the province of Quebec. And you can, you basically fly in there, but you can't drive. Anyway, he gets up to the site, and he phones me up from the site, and he said, Terry, you didn't tell me about the commodite boulders. And I'm like, Steve, what's a commodite boulder? And I had no idea that commodite is actually was before the Ice Age. It's the oldest form of lava on Earth, and it's usually associated, it's very rare, with giant nickel sulfide discoveries. So he was super stoked to see that. And so then we started to talk, and the team and whatever, and then we realized, wow, we got to get this guy. So we ended up, getting Steve to come on as our board member and a senior technical advisor, and he's been very instructive on helping us map out the next phase of what we're into now with Lion. And so this summer when he came on, after because after obviously all this, Steve coming on, all this fantastic success with the drill bit led us to raise money. Our stock had went from 20 cents to 66 cents, and we ended up raising $20 million at $1.25, which is a trick I'll tell you about in a second. But we raised it from pretty much the smartest mining guys on the planet. So we got Robert Freeland, the legendary, Canadian mining entrepreneur, from Ivanhoe, bought half. Rob McEwen bought 20%. A couple of mining funds bought the balance, and so we oversubscribed, all that good stuff. And so all of a sudden we had cash, and we had now got thought leadership from Steve. And Steve said, look, Terry, we need to take a step back. We'll still advance the Lion this summer, fall, but we need to do some deeper research and understand this beast. He said, look, to be honest with you, you've been lucky, which is fantastic. We all pray for luck in mining. But he says, what you need to do is you need to be much more process oriented on how to advance this. He says, I can tell you from, most likely what's happened. And he said, like, there's never any guarantee in this life, but he said what he would believe has happened. There's two real scenarios here. If you look at the Nisk deposit in the bottom left-hand corner, the southwest corner, if you would, it was 5.5 kilometers from the line zone. So he says most likely that those things are connected subsurface, which sounds crazy, but he says with polymetallics, they can stretch out for kilometers. So, and he said what happens is you have this giant nickel sulfide, oven effectively, and some hydrothermal action happens, picks up the copper sulfide, brings it up to the surface, precipitates, and you get it stuck in between these faults, and that's why you get such high concentration in these chutes, these polymetallic chutes. In this case, we had a copper one. He said he predicted we'd have a copper nickel one, we'd have a zinc one, would have a precious metals one, and even a PGE one. So he says this is what happens to these style of deposit, and the style of deposit is called orthomagmatic: copper, nickel, PGE, and gold silver deposit. And there's been not a ton of them in the history of the world, maybe like 25, 30. But some of the biggest mines in the history of the world, like Voisey's Bay in Canada, the legendary Voisey's Bay discovery that Robert Friedland made, Norilsk, in Russia, Sakatti in Finland, Xinjiang. There's a number of these, and there some are more nickely, some are more coppery, some are more PGE, and then you get the ones in the middle like Norilsk or Sakatti, and like us, where they're almost a third. So that's sort of what we found ourselves. So Steve recommended we do this big gravity program over the project, a ground EM program, and we started to use downhole EM or borehole EM. EM stands for electromagnetic, as the primary guide point, because what it does is that when you have a polymetallic ore body, it's reactive to magnetic imaging. So we're able to see, when I said when we made the discovery initially, was on an old EM anomaly. So what happens is the EM anomalies from the surface give you a clue as to where the ore body might be, but they're not 100% accurate. But and so what had happened, we got lucky in the first one. We drilled it, there it was. We drilled 16 holes, and 15 and 16 hit, because we were drilling between these faults that we knew were there because of the fleet space technology work we had done. Now the discovery to the east, the one that sort of, I think, got the market shaken last week and should get them shaken some more, it was on another EM anomaly. There was two. We drilled one hole in one, and then we didn't hit it, and then we drilled the second. We wanted to test the other one too. We drilled that, and we didn't hit it, but we got a sniff, and then we did the downhole EM in that hole, and it says, yeah, no, you missed it, maybe down to the right a little bit. We drilled another hole. Better results, but not the prize either. So, and we did the downhole EM again, and it says no, further to the right. So we then drilled the third hole, and bango, we hit it. We hit this intersection that we released a picture of it, I think in the last week or 10 days, which has got the line zone, has the copper sulfide, but also has a very high grade pentallite, nickel, copper, cobalt zone. So as Steve predicted. So pretty interesting, and obviously could open up, hopefully, it's just one hole, so it's not a zone yet, but we believe there will be a zone there, and that could obviously be huge for us. And we think ultimately that all of these zones will be connected subsurface. So somewhere down below here, most likely, is this nickel sulfide connector. Okay, we don't know. It could be deeper, most likely much deeper, maybe 700 meters, maybe 1,000 meters. And the trick with polymetallic exploration, Steve tells me, is to find these polymetallic zones and drill them down to to this, hopefully this discovery zone underneath. And that's that's the cost-effective way to make exploration work. Because if you're trying to find a 1,000-meter nickel deposit, it's a bit like sticking a needle in a haystack. It's very difficult. But with the downhole EM, the borehole EM tactic and having rich polymetallic zones to work with, we can get there. So it's interesting. Steve has there's a slide in our deck. If everybody wants to look at our presentation, it's at powernickel.com. You can pick it up. There's a slide in the deck that basically lays out this triangle of of the nickel, copper, and the polymetallic, or the PGEs, and gold, silver, the noble metals on top. And it's interesting, all those orthomagmatic discoveries in the history of time, for every 1 ton of copper sulfide that was discovered, it's ranged between 2 to 7 tons of nickel sulfide, on average 5 tons. So, for example, right now we're at probably 1 to 1 in terms of copper sulfide to nickel sulfide discovery, or and maybe even more copper at this point has been discovered. So what it means to us is that even while we know we're going to expand our copper sulfide, we think we should be, I don't know, I believe we'll be 15 plus by the end of April, and maybe 25 plus by the end of the year. What does that mean for us in the nickel when we find it? How big is that beast? In full disclosure and fairness, it could have eroded away. That's possible. But in the history of time, the average has been 2 to 7. Any of those numbers would be fantastic for us, of course. And also, Steve says, generally speaking, the math, you can, and he's done this himself, he's looked at all these polymetallic chutes and all these other orthomagmatic deposits. He's a very academic guy. He's a very thorough researcher. And he says, to have the richness of the high grade that we've got, these crazy grades that we're getting, the north of 5% copper equivalent, that didn't come from our current discovery at Nisk. Nisk is sort of like nice little deposit, 1.25%, 1.5%, grades getting better at depth, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe that's just the western fringe, and we're moving into the sweetness of the deposit, because he believes that the nickel sulfide ore body that ultimately probably made Lion and Lion 2, was much higher grade. So it's would have been more than 2% nickel, more than 2% copper, and robust cobalt and PGMs. So, we haven't found that yet. We may never find that yet, but we might well find it. And maybe Nisk is just the fringe of that. And I think the point we've been making on our roadshow, I've been on the road the last couple of weeks, talking to investors all over the world about this discovery, is that, you're getting this thing for pennies on the dollar, what we've already found. And I show them, our peers, like in the polymetallic exploration business, great companies like Foran and Fireweed and Firefly and Adriatic and Norilsk at the very top, and we're at the bottom, and yet I think Norilsk is, I don't know, 16, 20 billion, somewhere up there. We're not going to get there this year, but Foran's like 1.7 billion, and I think we think that we could get there material-wise in the ground, certainly possibly within 6 months. We're very close already with the others, and so as a result, we're saying, hey, we're way cheaper than those guys, and we got way more exploration upside. And again, not throwing rock to them. We think they're great companies as well and have done very well. We're just saying, if you like them, you got to love us. And as an investor, what you're looking for, like, at least because I'm an investor, what I'm looking for is asymmetric risk. I don't mind taking a risk. I just want there to be lots of upside and not much downside. So right now, I would say, and this is why, even though, that's one of the most common questions we get is, yeah, your stock's gone up 6 times or so in the last year. Did I miss it? I must have missed it. And I say, yeah, you missed the first $1, but you haven't missed the next 10 or the next maybe 30. Who knows? This thing has got that type of potential. And I think we're a better risk return bet right now than we ever have been, simply by the math of the metals in the ground, and I think my gut, everything I know, senses that we're going to find a lot more metal on the ground, and this is really going to give this thing wings. And people forget, because it's been a while, that when you make world-class discoveries, when you have a Voisey's Bay, when you have an Arequipa, and some of these legendary finds, they're 50 to 100 baggers. Okay, so yeah, we've gone up 6 times, but if this becomes a world-class discovery, which we think it will be, but obviously the drill bit will determine, then there's a long ways to go here. And I think that's one of the big messages we're delivering home, that and the message that we're really cheap compared to our peers. And I think that's why the stock's been moving, is that people are doing the math and saying, you know what, he's obviously he's talking his book, but he's not wrong. So that's interesting.
Yeah, certainly some more methodical approach here should yield more results. And I want to come back to some of those plans that you foresee for this year as well as next year. Before we get to capital structure, you mentioned some of the people already at the company. I want to talk about that just briefly. The team that's out there supporting you right now, you've talked about Steve. You recently added a vice president for exploration. Just talk a little bit more about the key people, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, yeah. So Joe Campbell is a industry veteran, been responsible for several major discoveries in his day in the gold world. He came out of Noranda, and then he ran Western Mining in Canada, and their projects group worldwide. And Western Mining ultimately became BHP, or merged with BHP. Western Mining would be analogous to Canada's Inco, one of the legendary mining companies. And funnily enough, Steve also was a Western Mining guy. So so Joe runs a company called GeoVector, and Joe and Adam Finley and Eric Hibbert and there's many great team members there, amazing geos and geophysicists and modelers. They basically they're one of the top 2 or 3 geological consulting firms in the country. One of the biggest challenges for a junior miner is it's very hard to recruit top tier talent and to pay them really when you're starting. So when we had this project, Ken Winson, who he was one of the team members as well, has done a great job for us. He made the initial discovery of the first 5 or 8 holes that became our Nisk project, which allowed us to grow. And then eventually we made the line discovery and have gone from there. And so we've been able to leverage the GeoVector team together with Steve Beresford to really get this great dynamic working, where we've got lots of boots on the ground that can, because we've drilled a lot. We started a 30,000 meter drill program in last summer. 15,000 happened by Christmas. We'll finish 15,000 more meters by the end of April, and we'll probably do 25,000 plus before the end of the year. Starting in June. And so we're drilling, aggressively. We've got 2 rigs on the property now. A 3rd rig will be added in mid-February. So we've got a really accomplished team that's using all the best technology. And I guess the cool part about polymetallic exploration is, the technology can really be your friend. The like that borehole EM. I mean, obviously structure is important. We're doing that too, but the borehole EM really helps guide the drill bit. And so we had probably, I don't know, 6 open faces of areas that we have had success in and are still wide open. And so we take turns drilling, and then we move the rig and do the downhole EM, and then drill, and then we're ready to follow up the downhole EM in the next round. So it's going to be a very busy year, and it'll also be a very newsy year. So you asked, and I don't think I somehow got off topic on it. Yes, about assays and when are they coming? So there'll be assays out, we think, this week. On some more of the holes that we drilled in the fall, and probably over the next 4 weeks we'll have there's 14 holes left to report. We expect that those will all come over the next 4 weeks, and then even while those are being completed and out, we've been drilling now for 2 or 3 weeks, and it takes about 7 weeks for that cycle to come through as well. So we'll pretty much have drilling news, every 2 or 3 weeks from now, pretty much through the year. So that's impressive and fantastic if you're an investor, because it's exciting, right? That we've been able to we have a very good understanding of the Lion Zone and where it's going at depth, and we don't know how the widths of it are more unknown, and we're testing that. But the depth is certainly very forecastable, and now we've got this exciting new zone to the east. And the interesting part is that we have identified. We just hired an internal geophysicist to help us with this borehole analysis, so we can make quicker, more accurate decisions with some very exciting opportunities to the west of Lion Zone, between the Lion and Nisk. And we think there's going to be a lot more interest in for us to drill, west of or east of the Nisk deposit, and west of the Lion deposit as it start to come together. So we see some exciting anomalies there that haven't been tested, and so far they've been super successful when we test these. So we're stoked about our exploration program going forward, and think it's going to be a robust discovery year for Power Nickel.
Terry, that sounds good. I appreciate you going through that. And it looks like, yeah, we're going to have lots of stuff to follow here as the year goes on here. And then, of course, hopefully you'll come back and continue to update on some of those results here on the podcast. Just with capital structure part of the company, I want to do this because we're obviously the first time talking to you. Cover off and you started to talk about some of the major shareholders. Of course, it'd be good to know more about those folks as well, and reiteration on that front, because I think it is important, some of the I's and checks that have been written on that part. But cover off the current shares outstanding, the cash on hand, and how you are looking at cash as far as budgeting for this program during 2025 that'll be ongoing. Of course, the major shareholders. And then one other thing to note here, Terry, you have a reasonably sized equity position in the company as well. Talk about that.
Roughly now about 100, I think 197-ish or 198 million shares outstanding. And then there's roughly 35 million warrants. I don't have the data in front of my nose at the moment, but something in that range of warrants at around an average of around mid 40s, 47 or something like that sense. About, I would say 30 million of those warrants are around 25 cents. And those are owned almost entirely by the top 6 holders of the company. The top 6 holders are myself and my family own about 18%. We paid for every share. We've been the largest investor over the last since September of 2020. We continue to write checks. Then we've got the Stern family in for several percent, like 7-8%. Critical Elements in for something in the 5 to 7% range. Obviously, Robert Friedland's around 5%. Rob McEwen's around 3%. CVMR's around 4%, and then Palace Capital and BT Global, 2 really sharp hedge funds in Canada who have been very faithful and supporters from the early days, have about 3 or 4% each as well. So that group owns up roughly 50% of the company, 48 or they're both 49. And they've all written checks over the last number of months. And it's always a good sign, I think, when the core shareholders are buying and writing more checks, because they obviously know the deal better than anybody and they're still buying. That's a good thing. So there is that. Probably another 10 very high net worth. We've got at last check 14 billionaires or maybe even more in the deal now, and including legendary ones like Gina Reinhardt. She moved the stock from 40 cents to 70 cents. The very wise and Australia's richest mining magnate, and then the Cohens and the many other big Australian investors. In fact, I'm heading to. I leave tonight. It's here in Riyadh. It's around 7, and I'm heading at 4 in the morning to Sydney, Australia for 3 days to meet a bunch of these people and do other investors. So we've been very fortunate, with our team, that people that, like, for example, introduce us to you, have also introduced us to these people. This is how we found them. We found them one by one, because that's the only way it's been effective, is to work through ultra high net worth networks, meet these folks, and they sort of understand the cut of your jib and understand what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it. They might start off by buying a few shares, and they watch you execute, and then and as you execute, they get more comfortable, that, hey, these guys are spending shareholders money properly. They're executing, they're advancing the ball down the field, and then at some point they realize, holy cow, this is going to be a good one, and they buy more, and so that's where it's at. And so for now, cash wise, we ended the last quarter around 12 million in cash on hand. We've come in, a bunch of them have come in already, and we'll probably get the balance in before the end of February from the existing guys. So it's given us a good cash position. What we've said in terms of financing is, obviously we don't need cash right now, which is an enviable position to be in. Stocks tend to run when you don't need cash and you've got results coming in. So in our view is the stock needs to move. It's way undervalued, and that it's at some point, as the market moves the stock and we get frothier valuations, and it's over the fullness of time will we raise money, of course, because we've got this beast to uncover, so but not down here. So that's been our message, and clear one, and people get it, and that's why even though we've been out in the last couple of weeks, we've had a lot of, I think, new institutions all buying, and that's what's moved the stock. So we're hoping to continue to encourage that over the next weeks and months.
Terry, that sounds good. So, it looks like folks should be definitely paying attention in the open market for this stock at this time, given what you guys are doing here. And most likely, as you said, there's no reason to raise at this level, given the cash you do have. And plus, you want to see this much higher. So very interesting here. And looks like we're going to have no shortage of news and potential appreciation here in the stock going into 2025. Appreciate you covering off also the major shareholders with folks writing checks like that. Where they did, and also having to come into the open market. I think that's a great indicator here as well of what you guys are trying to put together here. As you look forward here, there's groups already looking well ahead here. Just talk a little bit about how you're looking at 25, which is obviously a drill year. 26, is there plans in the foreseeable future for a maiden resource or initial start to assemble an initial resource estimate, Terry? Folks are going even beyond that as far as some things here, but just as you look at advancement of this, what comes through in your mind in terms of the sequence you'd like to see?
Yeah, so we do have a maiden resource on the nickel. So there is that. We don't have one yet on the lion. What we've done, what's become a bit of a pattern, like Great Bear did this, Philo did this, is we post all of our drill collars in Asmus, so people can independently use Leapfrog or whatever software choice they have, and model the deposit themselves, or the mineralized zone. Mineralized area themselves, come up with their own numbers, which is where we get this 8 to 10 million ton range right now. And then we'll continue to do that because it's growing so rapidly. It doesn't make sense for us to stop things and get the resource for Lion done at this point. We think that maybe in H1 next year, it may make sense to have it at that point. It really depends on, and I think shareholders should be hopeful that we don't need it for a couple of years, because that means that things are growing so fast that there's no point in stopping. So, but we'll expect that the independent analysts will keep posted us as to relative size. And then what we'll do to help with the clarity of the fiscal opportunity here is we will get a metallurgical study out on the Lion zone in H2 of this year. We've already started to work on it. That'll help to allow people to plug in some numbers, on the metallurgical side, sort of, I asked Robert Friedland about it before he invested, and, he has obviously a number of great projects in Ivanhoe, but one of them is Platte Reef, and it's a polymetallic deposit, lower grade, but he's getting 80 and 90% recoveries there, and he thinks it will have the same. It's a very interesting sectionalization of our ore. We think it'll be very good in that way. That's positive. But that's what we're thinking, is just to, as long as the drill bit's running so successfully, let's just let it run, and let's keep on punching it up, and obviously posting those colors, and letting people model it and update their models, and that worked very well for Great Bear, worked very well for Philo. We think it'll work well for us. And then in terms of the natural follow-up question is, are majors knocking at your door, and what's happening on that front? How do you see this thing ending? Because at some point, of course, the drill body will probably reach the end of it. Like, we'll find some limit. And then what happens then? So I think, again, the deposit always tells. So the deposit will tell the end story in this. And people have asked me, they say, well, hey, Terry, what do we offered you $500 million for this? I would say no, because we're going to get the $500 million very soon anyway, in a couple of months, maybe tomorrow, who knows? But if today you wanted to buy it, I'd say, $2 billion would be the number. But in 6 months or 9 months, it might be a lot more. That's, again, a very bullish forecast and outlook of where we see this thing growing. But the message we're wanting to send to the shareholders and potential shareholders is that when people take us out of this, they got to pay up. They got to take away a pile of risk that we're otherwise comfortable in taking, because we know the mineralized area well, and we're confident that we're going to be able to find a ton more material here. So we're not scared of this deposit. It's not a scary deposit. It's a very, very manageable deposit. We've got manageable techniques. We've got some of the best brains in the business that are inspired to find it. They're well financed to find it, and we're in a we haven't really touched base on wow, what a powerful jurisdiction Quebec is. And one point I want to make sure the audience understands, when we raised that last round with Robert Freeland, Rob McEwen, and those other mining funds, stock was 66 cents. We got $1.25, 1.9 multiple. We've gotten as high as 3, averaging around 2. So when we raise money because of the critical mineral in Canada, you can raise almost double what your current market value is at a price per share. Well, that's just amazing for our existing guys. It means a lot less dilution to find this exciting resource expanded. And then it gets better because to develop it, you also get, like let's say the first phase of development costs $400 million. 200 of that's going to come from the federal government and the provincial government. That's phenomenal for a project like this, because the reason why polymetallics are the most desirable mines in the world is because there's no one metal that can take you down. The other ones are going up, so that it's naturally hedged. And the internal rate of returns on these things is going to be probably north of 50%. It's going to be super exciting because it's such high grade. It's really got a lot of great things going for it. And yeah, the usual outcome on these deals is it gets acquired by a major, and the majors are certainly knocking at the door now, and some of them are in the discovery rooms and so forth, and there'll be more of them coming. But we're in no rush because we're no, again, unless somebody throws us some, very aggressive number at this point, we're going to keep on discovering, and eventually we're going to get to those numbers anyway. And that's our view. We think that we'll just keep executing. We keep following the technology, keep following the drill bit, and then we'll just see how far this thing can skate.
I think it makes a lot of sense here what you guys are already doing. You guys have already thought about this quite a bit to take this approach, and also there's absolutely no need. Let the market do the work for you on the drill results as far as their estimations, and the time will come for that later when the drilling settles down. So I like that approach as well. Very good position to be in here, certainly. Okay, I want to move on here and talk just a little bit about Quebec for a moment.
Yeah.
You've already given us some comparables, Terry, so we have a good idea of what comparables you're talking about here. Also, the audience can go take a look at the current company overview and take a look as well. There's additional comparables of publicly listed juniors that are also out there that Terry's looked at from a comparison basis, but you've also covered a number of these existing large deposits worldwide. You've covered a few of them. But talk a little bit about this immediate region where the project is as far as mining operations that might be in the area you can tell us about, as
Sure.
well as how you specifically look at Quebec regulatory for permitting
Yeah.
of these mines.
Sure. So I would argue Quebec is the best jurisdiction in the world to make a critical mineral discovery. 3 big reasons there. First is infrastructure. So in our case, we're literally located off of Route North. So it's at that point a 3-lane highway. So you can drive right off the road, right to our rig. So that's sensational. And then across the road is the Hydro-Quebec substation. So there's actually power lines on our property, which is a blessing and a curse. It's the blessing because of obviously power is there. The curse is that it does make the ground EM and airborne EM tricky. So airborne doesn't really work. You have to use ground and very particular type of ground. But eventually, through Dr. Beresford's extensive network, we figured out how to do that. But we have the power, which is, if you have to bring power in, like usually you find these deposits 200 miles away or 200 kilometers away from anything, remotely resembling civilization. But in our case, we're off the road to the rig. The power's across the street and it's on the property. And then we're 8 kilometers outside the town of Nemaska, which has got a regional airport. It's got accommodations and food for our guys. It's also the home of the James Bay Cree. One of the big, things that you need to consider whenever you're looking at mining projects anywhere in the world these days is what is the group's relationship with the First Nations, and is that, are that you're making this discovery and possibly going to develop a mine there, or are they unhappy? So in our case, we're blessed in that the James Bay Cree are very pro-mining. Within our territory there, I think there's 4 mines that'll come into being, 2 built and 2 being built. So they're very pro-mining, very sharp. I mean, we obviously respect that there's 2 seasons we don't drill. 2 times of the year, I should say. So end of May and end of April, so the month of May is sort of breakup time. So ground gets very mushy and it's also goose time. So they traditionally hunt for goose at that time. So we take off for a month. They do their thing, and we stay out of the field. We're still working, cutting samples and doing, science work at the site, but not on the field. And then September 15th to October 15th is moose season. So goose break and moose break, we take off and respect the native culture, and so that's worked out well. And then obviously, the third thing we touched on with Quebec is the government, has done a good job of educating the First Nations as to the benefits of mining, cut them in on the royalty structure. And in the case of James Bay Cree, because of the history of the Hydro-Quebec, investments and whatnot, these guys are professional money managers. They get business. They understand there's going to be something in it for them, and so they're very much in favor of it. And then finally, the financing terms we discussed, both on the exploration and on the development side. There's nowhere like it in the world. Permitting, they've got they're all across the country, and particularly in Quebec, they're moving to expedite permitting. So we're fully covered on permitting for drilling. We got everything we need there. And then, the mining permitting right now, I would say one would expect a 4-year cycle, from 2 years to permit and 2 years to build. If you started today, they're trying to expedite that. But, I think when people ask me, what would you think about production here? I say, look, realistically, it's a 29, 30 story, I believe, from a production perspective. But, that's very competitive worldwide. And the neat thing, again, because of the polymetallic nature and the robust, IRRs, because of the value, the high grade value of the rock, I think, there's certainly go decisions on the mining won't be a problem. And the CapEx on these types of projects isn't in the billions like it is in some of these lower grade, porphyry style deposits, and, with big crushers and stuff like that. That's not us. It's funny, we released a whole 32 meters of 7%, and it was at 110 meters of depth when we hit that 32 meter section. And at the night, as we're releasing the press release, and of course we had already gone down with all the images were 32 meters, 7%, blah, blah, blah. And I thought to myself, you know what? We actually could have taken it as an open pit hole and said it's 140 meters of more than 2% copper, equivalent, 2.25 or whatever it was. And I thought to myself, I bet you that market would have really loved that, because, I think when people see 32 meters of 7%, they think that must be 0.7%, or I don't know. They just don't get it. It's like, people go gaga over 100 meters of 1%, which of course is fantastic, but we've had many of those types of intercepts, right? Many, but they don't seem to get like, wow, it's way better to have obviously you need to have mineable thickness, and our average thickness is around, I think Joe said 23 meters. That's plenty mineable, but you're not having to move so much material. It's way better to have a high grade, but because it's been so rare, people, I think, have forgotten it, and so that's been one of the, the challenges when we're out on the circuit, talking about the story. I remind people that high grade is your friend. You want to be high grade. That's the number one thing you pray for as a miner. Near surface, high grade, please. So we got that, anyway, it's one of those amusing stories. I mean, miners are like farmers. They're never quite happy, right? Never get enough sunshine, not enough rain. It's the nature of the beast to always complain about something. So I guess that's us.
I appreciate the thoughts there, and then also on Quebec, and then also, not that you guys are gonna need, it doesn't sound like you guys are gonna need much financing support, but to have the government actually finally looking at critical minerals and some of the financing starting to open up in places like the US and Canada, that's always a nice add, because as you know, a lot of the private funding for some of this stuff was dried up quite a bit. And so you had to go after the government side because no one was paying attention to these things, or the capital was allocated somewhere else, attention to some other industry or what have you. Terry, one of the other things too, just on Quebec and also local community, just talk about the appetite in the local community there nearby the project, as far as, your guys' utilization of local service providers, how that
Yeah.
relationship is
So
being
we're
developed with the community.
Yeah, so our drilling is being done with a driller that's in part owned by the Cree, James Bay Cree. So that's good. We obviously stay at Cree-owned residential facility. We eat at a Cree-driven restaurant service provider. We hire locals. The good, the great thing about mining in Canada is that almost 10% of our workforce is Aboriginal. We're definitely the highest ratio of any any sector in the economy in terms of employing, the First Nations, and mining jobs are high paying. So that's why the First Nations like that, and and these guys do great work for us. And I go up every 6 months or so, and I meet with the community. I meet with the chief. We tell them what we're doing. They know they're partners in the project, and we've gone out of our way, and we'll continue to do so, because it's their backyard. We need to earn the right by being good corporate citizens. And one of the things we did right from the outset is we said, we would make this carbon neutral. So we were the first mining company in Canada to offset our drilling and carbon burn by buying carbon offset credits from Carbon X. We've continued to do that. We've basically, because of the nature of the deposit, thanks God, we're probably going to be able to do the carbon neutral thing, because Hydro-Quebec's across the road, so can certainly electrify the whole mine. Because it's an ultramafic deposit, it naturally sequesters CO2, so that's good. The CVMR, who we're using on the nickel powder side of things, there's 3 ways to make nickel. You can smelt it, you can do higher metallurgy, or you can use chemical metal vapor process, which is what they do. It's not a new technology. It's been around for 100+ years. Inco, or I guess now Vale, has like a 30,000 ton plant in Sudbury. Norolska, something similar. CVR has many 10,000 ton plants, and we're looking at doing one in conjunction with them. That's a unfolding business development opportunity that we'll talk about more as this quarter unfolds. We're really couldn't be more happy to be in this particular part of the world, working with with our community that we've got, and we'll continue to do everything we can to be a good corporate citizen and make sure we deliver a enormously successful package for them.
That's obviously a key area, and it's good to know you guys are working closely with the folks there and establishing a really good relationship. Credit to you on utilization of hydroelectric. I think that's often underutilized, forgotten about, and thank God that there's no solar and wind turbines involved here. So I really appreciate your guys' thinking on how to approach a really good source of energy, which is hydroelectric.
Yes.
So I appreciate that. Good stuff there. Well, look, I think it's pretty obvious here that I'm not going to ask you this question because you already covered it, but it's pretty obvious that you guys will be considering offers from majors out there who have interest in this project, obviously at prices that make sense for the shareholders. Terry, I'd like to leave it there for now, and any short of any additional closing comments, but I want to leave you with this question just in summary here. For potential investors who are listening in, the company has a market capitalization today of about 265 million Canadian dollars. Why should Power Nickel be considered within the institutional, family office, and retail investors portfolio at this stage?
Because our peers are valued at 3-4 times higher than us. And if you look at sort of market cap per unit of metal contained, would be the cheapest by far. And we also have, I would argue, more exploration upside than our peers, just because the projects are further along and mostly developed. They've capped out. There's very little exploration upside, where we have, as we discussed, absolutely sensational exploration upside. It's for the reason that you're buying it for pennies on the dollar, what we've already found, and by God, it looks like they can find a whole lot more. That's why, so the object is in motion. That's when you want to get on the train. We don't need cash. We got cash. We're drilling. We're creating value. We're getting out, and now we're finally. I think we made some. We brought in J.C. Evanson, a very experienced, I would call it institutional connected individual who's helped us translate our value proposition better, like a new slide deck, new comparables that's helped to explain the story better to the institutions, which is why they're responding. And I think that's going to continue to do so. So it's obviously everyone's got to do their own due diligence, get comfortable with it. But we think it's just on the math, it looks super exciting. And you haven't missed it. You missed the first dollar, but as I said, history shows us when you make a world-class discovery, it'll go on average 50 to 100 times. So we've gone 6. There's a long ways to go here, we think.
Terry, and how can interested parties get in touch with the company? What's the best way?
We routinely hold webinars. Probably once a month, we talk directly to our investors. They're invited. If they can join, they go to our site, they sign up to our site. at powernickel.com and sign up to our list there to be contacted. So we'll send them some information, keep them in touch with our news releases and any of our podcasts. They can reach out to myself or to Duncan. We routinely get back to shareholders. They're often surprised when I respond back. But again, we're a very lean company. We don't have a staff of thousands. We're pretty much pour money into two things: communication and getting out there and telling our story, and in the drill bit. But we do believe in being completely transparent with our shareholders. We tell them the good and the bad and what's going on, and we've always been that way. We will continue to be so, and because that's what we appreciate as investors. We want to be able to get the facts and make our decision based upon the facts. And one may have a different perception of things than another, and that's fair enough. I say to people that see it, and there's horses for courses. So it might not have been right for you at 20 cents when there was a lot more risk, but it might be right for you now, because even though it's whatever that we were at today, $1.30 or whatever, it's still a tremendous deal given what we've already found and how far it can go. So I think it's a good time to be looking and do your due diligence on Power Nickel, and indeed on many great stories in the mining space. I think I'm bullish also macro level on across the sector, certainly like the copper PGM stories. I'm big on precious metals. I like uranium a lot. So I think as a macro guy, and I've said this to people. I remember I was at VRIC last year, and they were asking me about the market. The market was crap at the time because of some Russian shenanigans or something. There was always something. And I said, look, my perception is now's the time to push it in, because, and I said, if you can't buy the Power Nickels of the world because they're pretty scary, the charts look scary and can't bear to write that check, buy a really good mining fund. There's many great, like the two of the ones that are in our company, Palace Capital, BT Global, they're sharp. These guys have done good work. Sprott's, ETFs in our space. So the number of great mining funds across, both the United States and Canada that do a great job of investing in the sector. The sector is going to have a big win. I think it's started, and it's got a long ways to go in my view, and you don't want to miss it. If you can't find the courage to invest in individual stocks, and I get that for some people, that's okay. Don't miss the sector. Sector is going to outperform, and tech super toppy. You need to be getting into commodities. Commodities are going to have a ripping run here, and you don't want to miss it. It'll be a life changer.
Terry, appreciate the additional comments there, and I think folks have something here to start with their due diligence, and appreciate the time here and the introduction program today. Best of luck on the Nisk project in the coming months. Looking forward to seeing some of those results come back, and then of course, you're welcome back anytime to update.
Okay, great, Andrew. Have a great day. Cheers for now. Bye.